Hello, everyone. I'm glad y'all are able to join us tonight. We're going to be talking about continuing with the Murdaugh trial and the homicides and tracking the shell casings through the crime scene involving the homicide of Maggie. But before we get into it and everything, as always, we'll a little bit of housekeeping. Um, do,
What?
You already put that in there. But anyway, no, that's fine. But a little bit of housekeeping before we get started here, guys. If anyone's new to the channel and chat, respect the mods, respect the families, and respect each other and have a good time and chat. And at the end of the presentation, we'll have a answer session. So absolutely, if you have any questions, you can ask them as Mrs. Steve will put them in line in order, and then we'll address them all at one time. All right, with that being said, we'll get into what we got.
Now, are you going to mention tomorrow night, or are you going to wait?
I'll wait.
Okay.
All right. As always, brief bio. This is Mrs. Steve, and I'm Steve. I'm a retired law enforcement officer, had 20 years of service. Started off my career in the jail, went onto the road, and then went into investigations. During those 20 years, I had all different types of training from SWAT to becoming a state certified crime scene technician, which helped my investigative career. I've handled all different types of cases from thefts, burglaries, all the way up to homicides. And after I retired, I decided to, after I discovered the true crime world, I decided to become an ambassador for law enforcement and do the best I can so that people can have an understanding of how law enforcement looks at things and how we process certain information so that working together, we can have a larger impact. All right, so let's get into it. Of course, we're looking at Alec Murdaugh, who's accused and is currently on trial for the homicides of his wife, Maggie, and his son, Paul, in South Carolina. And the homicides occurred, on June the 7th of 2021. So here we are in 2023, and the trial is ongoing and everything. And one of the things, as we did the recreation for Paul, and then we got into looking at Maggie, and I had, some of our previous shows, we addressed a little bit about the Maggie's homicide, but it was very, when you look at the trail of shell casings and that the crime scene sketch that was introduced into court, they have 7 cartridges, as they call them in South Carolina. We call them spent rounds, shell casings here in Georgia. But they were scattered in a certain order. And they had on that crime scene sketch, as we'll see when we get into it here in a minute, that it was items 2 through 7 as far as the cartridges, as they call them, and that were scattered out. And basically, it was like they were in 3 groups of, or 2 groups of 3 shots, and which didn't make sense to me. I'm in the crime scene processing world. When you have a firearm that ejects firearm or spent casings in a certain direction, it tells a story. And you can track that offender and you can track that firearm throughout a crime scene by where the spent casings are. All you need to know is that which way is the gun ported, which way does the ejected shell go, and about how far does it travel. When I was doing the test of checking the 300 blackout that I was using, it was ejecting consistently right between 7 to 11 feet. It depends on what they hit when they hit the surface. I was in a gravel area. Sometimes they'd kick just like they'd hit and they kick straight. Sometimes they'd hit the ground, kick right, left. And so you'll have some variance of how far those spent casings, after they're ejected, how far they'll travel. And like I said, they'll bounce around a little bit. But as long as you know the general directions, you're able to track that round. And when I was looking at those spent cartridges, shell casings that were laying on the ground, they didn't make sense. And we had a impact area that was part of the crime scene that when we look here, and I recreated the crime scene, of course, down at the bottom of the screen, we have Paul, which is to scale. That mannequin is 5'7". And then I have Maggie up there, who's to scale. That's 5'7" also. And when I laid them in the appropriate position, trying to look at the buildings, looking at the kennel where Paul was laying in the door, and looking at the area where Maggie was just near the doghouse and past the corner, I was able to recreate it. And I'm sure I'm within a couple of feet of what it actually is. And the distance between Maggie's head and Paul's head is 32 feet on mine. Which I could be off a couple, 3 feet. It just depends on orientations of, and we didn't have a diagram that the crime scene crime scene tech made available to the public. They just had that one that was not to scale, as you'll see. And this is the one I'm talking about that they measured the storage room and they measured the building. But the people, the victims, Paul and Maggie, are not to scale. And then you have these numbers, which the legend is markers 2 through 7 are the cartridge cases, and marker 13 is a bullet strike in the gravel. And so when I set this up, I went in and tried to create and recreate this to track that firearm. And it was very revealing of what I found out. Because it made no sense for the fact that we have a bullet hole in the doghouse, and it's coming from a strange direction. And how did that occur? And I don't know if it's part of this or not, but they in this doghouse they have the bullet coming in from another direction. Is that the way it came in? I don't know. I drawed it out that the bullet came in from another direction. I don't know which one is correct because I don't have a good visual of it. But I know a shot was more than likely fired that was fired from this position to answer how the layout of the projectiles occurred. For the fact that we have the crater, as you'll see here, I recreated and put a picture side by side so that you can have this and so that we can look at this. And was certain things moved at the crime scene? And it's possible that some of the staging occurred because it makes no sense about of some of the trajectories unless this is from the 6 casings, because we have to have 6 casings and 5 injuries to Maggie. And it just made no sense of the bullet layout, because from the impact area of number 13, we have items 3 and 4, which the firearm would eject 7. Item number 3 was ejected 7 foot 9 inches from, as you can see, my representation of Maggie there sitting in front of me. And then you see the impact at her feet. And so I think, and this is my theory, I've discussed it with Chris, and Chris has the
Chris is here.
Hey, Chris. And Chris is working with the video currently, and we're going to be putting the video out Monday. But I'm just giving a brief description of understanding what the positions are of this, of what I believe more than likely occurred that night that would create these shell casings. We have, like I said, knowing that the firearm ejects to the right, and we knowing that we have a bullet strike in the gravel, something had to occur for that bullet strike to get there. And of course, Maggie has a couple of injuries to her wrist and to her thigh that is at an acute angle downward. And I believe that this was possibly when those first shots were fired were from this position. And then, of course, it transitions from there, because we have another item that when we look back, and we have right above item 13, where is the impact crater, there's a shell casing, and it's listed as item number 2, and it's only like 3 feet away from the that crater, and it makes no sense of how a gun that ejects shells 7 to 11 feet would put a shell casing 3 feet away. And then it doesn't answer the bullet hole in the doghouse. And the bullet hole in the doghouse will be controversial because it is still kind of unanswered. What was the angle it came in there? Because there is a certain little bit of unknowns about that position of that bullet. And but we'll get into that later and probably on another show because, like I said, it's still unanswered. Was the doghouse turned or not? Just don't know yet. But anyway, we know that from this position that we have 2 bullets that strike and land in the ground within a certain area that is that you can replicate when you fire that firearm. That those ejected rounds, when it's pointed in a certain direction, they'll eject to the right, somewhere between 7 feet and 11 feet. Items 3 and 4 do that. Now, to get a bullet to land in where item number 2 on this crime scene sketch that was submitted by the crime scene tech, you have to be in this position. And when I shot this one, it kicked it over 9 feet, and it put it within 3 feet of where that crater was. I just had it off a little bit. I wasn't standing far enough forward. If I had been, it would have put it and replicated it. So I believe that position number 2, when another round was fired, it either it went into Maggie, or it missed the doghouse, or it struck the doghouse and the doghouse was possibly turned. Don't know, but it was strange that we have a bullet that from the diagram that is submitted, it shows on that diagram that it's coming in from a different direction, and that makes no sense to me. But we only have 6 shell casings, and those 6 shell casings tell a story. And for you to get that item number 2 in this location, this is where the gun would have had to be in that approximate area to get to this position. And like I said, I'm not saying that there wasn't an additional shot fired from somewhere else, and they may not have recovered a shell casing that we don't know. It could be one that was lost, or the gun could have jammed and failure to eject. There's a lot of things that could have happened that would create that doghouse angle that it shows coming in on, because that's an unknown, and it makes no sense, and unless the doghouse was turned. But like I said, that's up to debate, and that's totally speculation, but I don't know what else to make of it. But to get the item number 2 at this location, this is where position number 2, where a shot would have to be fired to get it in that line that's seen. Now, then we have the 5 and 6. So we've always addressed item number 2, number 3, number 4. Now we have to address the shell casings of 5 and 6. And where could those shots have been fired? The gun ejects to the right. So once again, when I fired, I was able to fall within those parameters from this position, position 3. It kicked it slightly over the right shoulder. I'm standing just to the right. If Maggie is face down, I'm standing just to the right of her, gun pointed down, and this is where the shells eject to position 5 and 6. And so knowing that, then we have to figure out where item number 7 and how it got to the position 4. And this is what everyone is saying, that the 4th shot was the one that was a fatal shot to the back of the head that had stippling. And I believe so. When I took the shot and had it at this angle, it kicked the ground right beside the foot and then it kicked out. And of course, it went 10 feet when it kicked on out. If I'd hit the clothing of this mannequin, I believe the bullet or the shell casing would have just stopped there and would have landed very close to what was represented in the crime scene sketch, which, as you can see here, they have items 5, 6, and 7. They have 7 almost at the left or the right knee. And I was trying to replicate that, but like I said, when the bullet hit the ground, it kicked up, spiked straight up. And you can see these shell casings on the right in the actual overview from my drone footage that shows 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, and those items and those spent casings. And the reason that we have to understand this is that the shell casings and the bullet strikes, and there could be, like I said, at least one more shot that may have been fired that was a failure to feed, or a round that was kicked, or a round, a spent casing that was never found. Because when you look at the projectile in the doghouse, it's coming in from a strange angle out from that side. And if that's the way it's pointing, that is something that there's no shell casing that is reported in that area. And we have, what could have caused that? How could that have happened? I don't know. But now the positions of 3 and 4, we're estimating or guessing. But how could, and we really don't know the situation on this. And it is very confusing, and it's hard to follow. And I did this so that you would have an understanding of possibly what had happened. The alternative, that if the doghouse was not turned, then you would have had to have Maggie standing in front of the doghouse, and this shot while Maggie's in front of the doghouse is fired, and she runs back towards Paul and falls down, and the projectile number 7 is at her knee from that position. That's the other alternative of this. But, either the doghouse was turned or she was standing in front of the doghouse when shot number 7 went off. It's one of the two. And I just didn't do position number 5 for the fact that it's going to be open to debate, and I don't know what law enforcement knows. I don't know if they checked the doghouse to see if it'd been turned, or if there's blood spatter on the front of the doghouse. I don't know. But the positioning of answering how number 2 got there has to be almost a shot fired from position 2, because there's nothing else that explains how that shell casing could get 3 feet away from the gravel, bullet strike in the gravel. And for the fact, if you're trying to get it there at 2, 3 feet, the gun has to be pointed straight down towards the bottom of the area, or it has to be deflected off of something. And but this is the only way that we can, as I was recreating it, trying to explain it. And but as we go at this, like I said, we don't know everything that law enforcement knows, and we have to speculate on some matters of it. I feel confident about position 1. I feel real confident about those positions. Position 2, I feel pretty confident about it. Position 3, I feel pretty confident of something happening in this area. But position 4 is the one that, to have a gunshot wound with stippling, it almost has to be at this location, and it kicks back. And like I said, the mystery, and it's a mystery absolutely I cannot figure out yet, is that on this doghouse, they have a round coming in from an angle where matches none of the bullet recovered cartridge cases. And so we'll have to look at that, and it's possibly that the 300 did fail to eject, and we have another round that we're not accounted for. Just don't know. But anyway, I hope this, when you see the video itself, you'll understand it a little bit more, because you'll see me move the representation of Maggie through the scene and take those shots. And I did strike the doghouse while standing in position 2. And I was trying to see, is that when the bullet struck the doghouse? Because a 300 blackout shouldn't stop just by a doghouse structure. It is indicative that the bullet has passed through something else. And was that Maggie? It's very possible. And so, like I said, it's going to be open to debate about that shot, and it makes no sense to me. Of all the shots, the one in the doghouse makes no sense. But anyway.
So does your video have actual shooting in it?
Yes, the video does have shooting in it.
So severe trigger warning.
Yes. Yeah, and the importance, like I said, the guns, they repeat, and the ejection is something that repeats time and time again, and it is repetitive, and you can test it, and it's consistent. And so you're only looking at a circle that's about 3 to 4 feet in diameter, and where these shell casings consistently land. And to explain the story of being able to say where those shooters, or where this offender was standing where certain shots were fired, for these shell casings to be in this linear of 2, 3, and 4, and then 5, 6, 7, and the gun ejecting to the right, means that that gun was pointing in areas that had nothing to do with the doghouse, other than if you're in position 2 shooting from the corner towards the doghouse. But it doesn't replicate how that bullet hole is represented in this diagram. Is the diagram wrong? I don't know. I hadn't seen what the jury has seen. I know the diagram is not to scale, and so it may just be that simple, that they is something that is just some misinformation that we just currently don't know. But anyway, I know that probably add more to the confusion than the answer, but when we get through the questions and everything, hopefully it'll clarify a little bit.
You ready?
Uh-huh.
All right, we're going to start off with T-Bird. AM didn't travel far from the shoot after the shootings. Where do you think he hid the guns if he's guilty?
Some of those stoppers, when he stopped, was he meeting with someone? Was he transferring the guns off to someone? I don't know. Is that a possibility? Absolutely. I mean, he may have had someone that was assisting him or not. We just don't know yet. Or there was a second offender at the location that took the firearms and went in another direction. But the prosecution is not currently going that route. They're going totally on Paul as being as Alex being the offender who committed a homicide against Paul and Maggie.
Oh, Chris gifted 5 memberships.
Thank you, Chris.
You so much. I got to do my blue light, but I only got one hand.
Okay.
All right, and
But
hold on 1 second.
When you hear the attorneys discussing that, they discuss that the shell casings and the shooting makes no sense, and I agree with them. It still doesn't make sense for me, and I've worked on this and worked on it, and
worked on it,
and there's that one bullet hole that they've got coming into the front of the doghouse, unless I'm misreading it, and that makes no sense to me. And until I figured out that to get that one shell casing within 3 feet of the impacted area on the gravel, the only location you could fire a gun to get a shell casing back to that location is standing there at the corner shooting towards the doghouse.
Okay.
So when I get stumped, I don't mind telling you I'm stumped on some things, and I'm stumped on that one. Now, like I said, the entry onto that doghouse makes no sense to me currently.
All right. And hedgehog in space. Does it make sense if some of the casings get excluded as older shots?
You know, it could be that, and you may be right, that someone did shoot into the doghouse from an older shot that has nothing to do with the homicide. That would make sense, but that'd be the only thing that makes sense. The others, you know, they would, you know, as a crime scene technician, and you work in a crime scene, and you're looking at these shell casings, there's a lot of difference between a fresh spent casing versus something that's oxidized, that's been laying out in the weather. When you're at the, when you look at the video of the agents, when they're gathering those older spent rounds near the gun room, those are the old brass that's discolored and been out in the weather for a long period of time. That's not what freshly fired, new, well taken care of ammo looks like. In the same being shot within hours of a homicide.
All right. And single mama 4, do you think that Murdaugh had help?
It appears, you know, would he have taken the risk of going and meeting and of the family being that, you know, his cousin who eventually tried, you know, that he hired to cause self-harm, were there others? It's very possible, and it wouldn't surprise me at all.
And Jennifer Rochelle, in your professional opinion, was it one shooter or, oh, that was the same question. One shooter or more?
Well, you know, there's a rule that pretty much anytime you have two different weapons, you have two different shooters. You know, statistically, I would stick with that. It's, you know, I do believe that there's probably more than one, you know, unless it makes no sense otherwise. It is quite concerning, but if I had a coin flip and which way I was going to go right now, I believe that it's more than likely there is a second shooter.
And Cynthia Carter, which shot finally took her out? I'm assuming Maggie.
If the reporting I heard, it's probably going to be this one, that they said there was stippling to the back of Maggie's head. And so that would be the one that exited the right cheek. On my model here, that would go through in such a manner, that would probably be the one that would have been the fatal shot. And more than likely, there's one or two of those other shots that may not have been survivable also. Because I think she had one that entered in from her lower torso, went through chest cavity, and then lodged into her cranial vault also, and that was probably non-survivable also. But the one to the back of the head would be the one that was the last, I would imagine.
Yeah, I would think so. All right, let me get this down.
So if anyone's got any ideas of how we can have a gunshot to the front of that doghouse,
you got some in here.
I'm open to that.
Yeah, you got some ideas in here.
Good.
All right. And Jill, maybe the doghouse had been shot a while ago. How would they know if it was recent?
Generally, with the splintering and stuff, you can look at it and see how if the weathering, if it looks like it's a fresh injury to the wood and it's not aged or discolored or spider webs in it, and that might be the way they could. Um, and like I said, it just shows that the rounds coming in from the front. And the only way they could have occurred is if Maggie's in front of it, a round is fired, and that's the one that's next to her right knee, and she staggers forward and just by chance lands next to it. That's scenario position number 5. But that'd be the only other way, that I can get that shell casing to position number 7 as what the crime scene tech has.
Okay. All right. And missed. If we could see the Pharaoh 3D imaging seen early in the case, maybe we could tell about the doghouse. Don't think they will release.
Yeah, I don't know. And I know there's pictures of the doghouse where they got the angles on it, but I can't see what orientation away from it. If anyone has any pictures that show which way the house is facing, absolutely send them to me because I'd like to get that shot if it is related, and I believe it is related because law enforcement wouldn't be taking measurements and angles without a reason.
Okay. And Ann, where do you think he hid the weapons?
I think during those stops or something, either he met someone and they took him on, or they're in water somewhere.
Okay. All right. 8:30 is Vicky. I am behind. Okay. And Buzza, where was Bubba and who put him away?
Who's
Bubba?
Bubba's the dog.
Oh.
That had the chicken that the 3 of them were in the video discussing. Right before before the homicide, within minutes of the phones becoming inactive.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And Hedgehog in space. Do you think that's because of shoddy investigation or unreleased details?
I don't know. I like a prior comment. If we could see what the jurors are seeing, it might make more sense. But it just confuses me when you see the angle. Is that pointer pointing to where the bullet is lodged in the doghouse, or is that saying that is the direction the projectile came in? And I don't know. I just don't have that information. When I saw that arrow coming in from that direction, it confused me. But when I see the shell casing number 2, that's only 3 feet away from that crater of the gravel impact, for that trajectory, for that spent casing to get to that location, it has to be shot somewhere up there from that second position. Or at least I was able to replicate that. And if you can replicate it, there's a possibility that occurred.
Okay. Let's see here. There's Erna. Okay. That's what I was looking for. And Carrie Michelle. All right. And y'all keep coming.
Excellent.
A little slow, but I'm she's hanging in there.
She's doing better on her arm. It's feeling a little bit better.
Finally. All right. And Neroli, do you think there was a second person because of the doghouse?
No, just because there's a second weapon involved. Time and time again throughout cases and crime scenes, that when you have 2 weapons used, it is a strong indicator of 2 offenders. And mathematically, those are the numbers. And it is strange that they're going, or that they put it all on one individual right now, and it is possible that he did use two guns to cloud the issue and create the staging and misdirection to trick law enforcement, because that would be highly debated and will be highly debated all the way through this trial, regardless if he's found innocent or guilty. That will be a debate that I can see both sides.
All right. And Jill Downey, the doghouse wasn't from that night. Why are you so sure it happened at the same time?
I don't know. Is that what's been reported, that the dog house shot didn't occur that night? If that's true, then why would I'm confused on some of the testimony. I haven't heard all the testimony. I'm not sure it happened at the same time. I am sure that the shell casings to represent that those positions I put out there would create those shell casings being in those positions. But the shot to the doghouse, I don't know if it was that night or not. No, I'm not saying it's absolutely sure. I'm not making that claim at all.
And Lynn, are parts of the bullets in the person, Paul and Maggie, or partial with parts out and around the person that they have or found?
Bullets often will enter and they start fragmenting depending on the hip bones or things, or if it's the design of certain bullets that are jacketed and otherwise, what type of round is it and what was it designed to do? And like I said, some bullets do start coming apart and expanding. And when they strike bone, they can do a lot of different things. And then you'll have bullets that will pass through, and they'll leave a trail of debris of lead, jacket, which is copper, and other metals that would be left around in the wound channel. And then they would pass through and strike the ground. And law enforcement are the ones that were under. Are they able to calculate and figure out where they struck the ground at what angle or through a person? They'll be able to recover those.
All right, and I think I'm caught up.
Excellent.
Looky there. Okay, metal. All right, and Steve, question. The shot at the front of the doghouse, do you know what caliber that was? Curious if to know what firearm was shot from outside the doghouse.
I don't know. Like I said, looking at it here, I don't know if that's a pointer pointing to where the bullet was located and they just put it at that angle, or if that's the angle it entered the doghouse. And like I said, that's something I just don't know. And it's interesting that we have a round that law enforcement investigated at the doghouse. And then, like I said, one simple explanation is that item number 2 was the doghouse turned at some point, and they rotated it for some reason, and I don't know. There's several possibilities. And sincerely appreciate all your hard work. Haven't been able to find any insight regarding the crime scene. Thank you.
Appreciate you so much.
Appreciate your support.
All right,
hopefully I hadn't confused the issue too much, but like I said, the shell casings, law enforcement would be looking at them and they'd be trying to analyze of how those casings got in those locations. And there's more than one way, but this would be the way that I would present it and say that this is what I see. And of course, others will bring up their points. And at the end of the day, all the questions would be answered.
Vicky would like for you to share how the blue light works. She's a newbie.
Anytime
That's my toy.
when people join as for members, or if they contribute any type of donation, we recognize their support by use, and also for renewals of memberships and things. Mrs. Steve activates the blue light, or she'll activate it at some time just for fun.
Just for fun. I like my blue light. If it had a siren, that would be even better.
Yes.
Hint, hint. Okay.
So I gotta get a siren now, guys.
Just not too loud. All right, let's see here. Let's go there.
But I'm looking forward to see what I sent Chris the video a couple of days ago, and so he's working on it. And with the video, like I said, you'll see the movement through it, and it once again it shows exactly the casing trail, and hopefully between this presentation and that presentation, you'll have a little bit better understanding of how law enforcement looks at it. And often while you're doing these experiments and these controls, you find things that you just can't answer, and that only the offender and the victims know. And when the victims are victims of a homicide, they're not able to tell you. And so you have to work it out. And we don't have those true trajectory. I don't have all the blood spatter. If I had that, then of course it would be far easier for me to not have to speculate on some things.
And Jill.
Thank you for your hard work. Fascinating. Your expertise is obvious. Yes, but even with that expertise, I try hard. But like I said, you don't always get what you're looking for. Sometimes as you work these mysteries, there's even more mystery.
Chris says sound effects are easy to get a hold of. Ooh.
The wind is absolutely been horrendous the last 3 days here.
I think he's talking about my siren.
Oh, okay.
All right, and
thank you. Appreciate your support.
Thank you so much.
Oh, you talking about a siren?
Yeah. You don't know it's been windy? It's really windy tonight.
No, we were discussing it the other day about the sound.
Yeah. Well, it is bad today. Okay, let's see here. All right, here we go. All right, and this is from Vicky. Do you think Murdaugh would take the chance to have a second shooter after what happened with Cousin Eddie?
Well, the homicides occurred before Cousin Eddie, so yes, at that point. And who could it have been? I don't know. But like I said, throughout, time and time again, when there's more than one weapon, there's more than one shooter.
And Erna, did you try shooting on the run, moving around very quickly? Hard to aim on the run.
No, but there is, you'll see if Chris incorporates some of the shooting. Now we're talking about extremely close range with a rifle. You don't have to, for people that are proficient with firearms, when you're talking about just a few feet, really doesn't matter. You don't really have to use any type of sights. And I have a demonstration of shooting slow fire, which is probably around 3 rounds in under 2 seconds is slow fire. And then I shoot a little bit faster using the sights, 3 rounds in probably just over a second. And then I shoot 3 rounds probably right around a second or under a second. And all the groupings are less than 2 inches. But we're at such close range, 15 to 20 feet, that regardless of a rifle or shotgun, and if it is individuals such as Alex, who is a seasoned hunter, his instinctive shooting you would expect would be better than average.
And Ruckus Rocks. Any chance the doghouse was a 007 Ricochet?
I don't know. Like I said, I've looked at it, and it says projectile, and it has that arrow coming in there. And is that arrow showing the direction of travel, or is that arrow pointing at where the projectile was recovered and not point of impact? So it's very confusing to me. I know how, if you go from position 2, I know how that projectile could get in that location after passing through Maggie and then striking the side and being located inside the house. And that this is simply an indicator of where the projectile was found, not where the impact was. I don't know which it is. It may be that simple. I just don't know yet. It's just that they've got that pointer, and I don't know what that means. It's not a well-defined crime scene sketch that is not to scale.
And you've got lots of subscribers out here. So
Thank you.
Thank y'all
We
very
appreciate it.
much for the new subscribers.
Yes.
All right.
It means a lot to us. Thank y'all.
Victoria Jones. Could the guns be down an old well?
Anything's possible. And as you know, he has 1,700 acres. And I'm sure there's lakes and rivers in that part of the country that within a day or two he could have had access to, that he could most certainly have dumped them in a lot of different areas if he didn't have someone assisting him. Just don't know.
And I think I missed one because I think somebody mentioned something about an old tree that was falling down. Wonder if the guns could be under the tree. I guess the same thing. It could be. I mean, right?
Yeah, anything's possible.
Okay. All right. And from Carrie, did you see the interview in the police car that night? Did you think it was odd he shed no tears, never used tissue, and his body language?
You know, the way that people react emotionally, unless you've known them for years, you don't know when they're out of character. And so it's hard to judge certain individuals. So I don't put a lot of weight on how any individual that I do not know for a long time of how they're reacting. Like I said, some people handle stress extremely well, and some people they can't take it. And you know, it will always be overanalyzed. But like I said, I don't put much weight in it. But I did see it.
Okay.
There's Purdue RN. Hey, Purdue.
Well, she sure is. Hey, Purdue.
I can catch a glance at the angle here every now and then and see
Every
something.
now and then. Give Mr. Winston my sugars. All right. And Lynn, was the tree in the same area that fell over in the video? Just checking if he would be behind it shooting.
These shell casings are, if they're related to the homicide and they're laid out in this manner, to get to one that has it all. Now this is my reconstruction of the crime scene. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. That gun, like I said, only ejects the shells to the right at a set distance of anywhere between 7 and 11 feet. And it depends on how they bounce on the ground. So the firearm has to be within 7 to 11 feet of where these casings are found. The gun kicks to the right. So the gun, for these casings to be located in this area, the gun during the firing sequence has to be 7 to 11 feet to the left. And if these shell casings that they recovered here at the scene, especially with that crater, that we know that a gun was fired that created item number 13, the bullet strike in the gravel, and which corresponds that 7 to 11 feet from items number 3 and 4, which are 2 cartridge casings that were recovered. And so I think that 3 and 4 were fired the first 2 shots, and one of them, we don't know where it struck. But when you see the video, I put both of them in the ground in the same spot. But you'll see that in the video on Monday.
All right. And Kathleen, what time of night were these murders?
I think, well, the phones go off the air between just a little bit after 8. And of course, he doesn't call 911, or Alice doesn't call 911 with the discovery until several hours later. But the theory of the state and the theory of everyone is of course, that when Paul and Maggie quit answering and replying to all their messages and phone calls and all the movement and steps of the any type of indication of movement to the phones stops, that's when they and that happened just around 8, just after 8, I think.
And Sean, evening, Steve and Mrs. Steve. Question: is there a lot of mathematics used in ballistics?
On angles, of course, whenever you're trying to figure that angle out, yes, that would be. But that's about all the math. Bullets fly straight, other than what over long ranges. At close quarters, they're not going to be dropping or any of this. And once a bullet does enter a human body, it strikes bones, and they can start yawing one way or another. Yawing. And there's a yaw. There's a yaw that it will veer off as it puts all its energy, is transferred into the human body, and as it destroys the tissues. But as far as all the mathematics, it's not really. Now, there's a lot of mathematics in blood spatter. There's far more mathematics used in blood spatter than they are in the trajectories.
You are so right. Okay, let's see here. Let's see if that's okay. Hold on. Let me get halfway. I'm behind again. Okay. And I can't say 2 of these words, I don't think. After all your investigations and reenactments, do you think it could be a MS at all?
Yes, that is a possibility. He lost a nerve, and then he hires Cousin Eddie and to do the deed. And of course, Cousin Eddie fails to. The offender, if he did have help that night, chose not to do the second part of that.
Oh, Winston says back at you.
Oh, Winston.
Oh. All right. And Net Detective, what do you believe the verdict to be?
Well, he's always presumed innocent until convicted. And but there is a lot of, they're doing a trial right now, mostly on financial. We're looking at a homicide, and at some point they're going to have to concentrate more on the homicide versus the financials. And it's a toss-up, right now it's I wouldn't put my money on a conviction right now, which is the way it should be. Until that final witness is up there, you should be, until there's absolutely something that says that he was the one that committed these crimes, which there's a lot of, I'm more towards it, but there's, he certainly has an opportunity to voice of why he is innocent. The missing clothing, the changing of clothing, his voice on the audio of when he says he's asleep. That's the strongest evidence they have right now. And why they've not just went with that, the missing clothing, the house keeper, and stayed, it's fine to try to create motive with the financials, but this is just my opinion. Now just stay with that. He lied. He says he's asleep. He's at the dog kennel within minutes. And then he has missing clothing. If we stayed with that, but all this other stuff, it seems like they're trying to, throw more on the fire than it absolutely needed.
And Jenny G.A., how plausible would it be that he could have hosed himself down at the kennels?
If he is the one that pulled the trigger on that shotgun, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely.
All right.
Because I was covered with everything from, as you can see, my Tyvek, my Yeti suit. It was had a fine mist of spray all over me of the synthetic blood that I used.
All right. And Dolly and Gabriel, question: do you think the agencies messed up the crime scene?
There's always mistakes made on crime scenes. When you go into a crime scene, you have to make decisions of what evidence you believe is important and why it's important. And you may miss something, and once you go past it and step on it, it happens. But you try to minimize those destructive moments and keep those impacts low. But it does happen. And then you have certain things that when they're not clearly defined or answered, it leads up to speculation. And is the jury following along or not? No, there's always going to be certain things that crime scenes messed up by law enforcement. It's not the CSI stuff that you see on TV. The crime scene techs are human. They're going to make mistakes. And, they just have to look at it, debate it, and the answer is there. They just may not realize it until someone finds that one missing part of it and they say, oh, okay, it makes sense now. Like the bullet in the doghouse. It doesn't make sense to me right now. It drives me crazy.
All righty.
How the shell casing got to where number 2 is doesn't make me crazy. I understand that. I just don't understand the trajectory on the doghouse.
And Madison, hello, Mr. Steve. Why do you think they did not check or search his house the night of the murders?
I thought that he gave them permission to do whatever they needed to do, and I don't know how far. I hadn't heard the testimony on that. So that will be interesting if all that information is out there. But I thought they may have. I don't think they went to the house, and I don't know how extensive they searched in the area.
Yep. And Carrie Michelle, with your expertise, why wasn't Alex taken in for questioning? Alex said he tried to move the body and pulse, yet he had no blood on his hands or shoes.
And my recreation of luminol and the booties that was on my shoes, if he walked close to those to Paul or Maggie, then he should have had some type of blood. And I don't know if they tested him with some type of presumptive blood test on his shoes and on his clothing. I think there was some minimal amount of some type of blood, but they can't process it for DNA. Now, if it's high velocity blood, I don't care if they process it for DNA or not. If you show me something on his shirt that is a blood spot that is high velocity, that is the size of a straight pin, then we got issues. But if it's just a smudge or a transfer of a swipe of when he touched the neck area or the wrist area, and then maybe swiped on his shirt, then of course that can be explained away.
Okay. And Mist at True Crime Web, how much blood spatter would you expect? Above or below the waist?
Well, it depends on the positioning of the, because whenever you're close to a victim that is shot, you have uh, back spatter and forward spatter that comes from the shotguns or the rifle round when it impacts the human torso, and uh, the forces and the pressure, because you're talking about all the kinetic energy, and sometimes it's in, especially with a shotgun, it's 2 or 3 thousand pounds of kinetic energy that's transferred into the human body, and it creates a tremendous amount of blood spatter, both forward and backwards. And if you're within a certain distance, there's going to be a lot of it. And it will be above and below. It just depends the angle. The angle I shot on Paul on the mannequin going up, all that rained back down on me from head to toe.
That dog. And Dolly and Gabriel, do you think Paul got shot first and Maggie seen it and took off running?
Yes, I do believe that Paul was shot first. And if she did take off running right then I would expect that she would have gotten away. But if this first impact is the first confrontation, and from doing this control, that when you see the video, for you to transition from where that ground impact is and follow the trail of how you could create these spent casings in this location, that 13 where the impact is, you say that is ground zero. That's where she's at, and she's shot there. And then she takes off around the corner of the building being pursued. And we have multiple shots. If Paul wasn't first, I do not think he would have stayed in that room. He would have been out there. And I think that he would have also been shot with a 300 blackout. And the only reason I don't, and because it takes several seconds to go this distance of what Maggie traveled to get these shell casings in these positions. And it's not something that happens in 1 or 2 seconds. You're probably, when you watch the video, I think I did it in 59 seconds, but that was doing it very deliberate, very slow, and to set certain angles. But of course, I could have completed the whole sequence of shots, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 items, which is only 6 shots. I could have made those shots, and probably even with her trying to get away, in probably less than 5 seconds, but or well within 10 seconds. And I don't think it took that long, but it is something that is reasonable to expect. 5 to 10 seconds is what would have taken for Maggie to receive all the injuries, and Paul wouldn't have stayed in that room for 5 to 10 seconds if there's gunfire going on outside the room.
Dilly Pickles sent you an email with doghouse pictures,
Okay,
so you can sneak up.
I'll look at them and maybe that'll answer my question.
All right. And Hedgehog in Space, are most crime scenes this weird, or are they typically more straightforward?
They're all weird.
That was easy.
They're stuff that you see that is related to the crime, and you see things that are unrelated to the crime, and you don't know which is true. And so you just have to hash it out, and hopefully you're correct more often than you're not. But no, there's nothing simple about crime scenes. Like I said, it's not the TV series where it's just this Perry Mason moment. That's just very, very rare.
And Alice, how long after the video at the kennels did he shoot Paul, then Maggie?
It's just within a few minutes. It's not long at all. And it's during that time period that Paul, when he sent that Snapchat video to his friend that his phone dies. And it's during that same time period that Alex says that he's asleep at home, but his voice is on that video. And, so it just doesn't make sense. And when someone says something that is provable as a lie, they lie for a reason. Now, does the jury understand that? I don't know.
And Kathleen, if he used 2 different vehicles that night, were both of them checked for DNA?
I would expect so. And but once again, when we're looking for DNA in vehicles, all the family used those vehicles. It depends on what type of DNA, so it's not just that you find, and that's what's so hard about investigating crime and crime scenes that are committed by family members. The DNA is going to be there, and you just don't know when that DNA was deposited. Even blood, people suffer injuries and own vehicles for a long period of time, and so you may have certain types of DNA transfers in these vehicles, and you just don't know the time period of when it was deposited. Just like the expert testified the other day on the gunshot residue, that gunshot residue will stay on those surfaces until they're cleaned away, and so there's not a lot that you can say about the gunshot residue.
And red shift, is there any way to tell if one or more casings are older? Guns were used there all the time.
Other than whatever type of lab work they're doing on it, and see how fresh how long is there any oxidation, or the all the shell casings consistent, bright, shiny, fresh there, and so really just by whatever type of lab work to establish. Are all the shell casing consistent with the same type of ammo from the same manufacturer? That's be the only way that they can determine.
All right. And hedgehog, can luminol fluorescence for anything that is a false positive for high velocity spatter? Spray, cleaning chemicals, maybe?
Absolutely. And they will react with bleach and things, and a little bit different coloration, but it still reacts with
them. Okay. And that's all I have marked. So let me go see what's come in since then. I got some.
Just to rehash, I feel pretty comfortable about position 1, 3, and 4, items 3 and 4 being in that position. I feel pretty comfortable for how number 2 got there, being shot in that direction. But as far as where the bullet struck on the doghouse, because I don't have all the images, hopefully that'll get answered. And I'll look at that was sent to me, and I'll see, are they pointing from the crime scene sketch, or is that the direction that came in from? So hopefully I'll have that information for Monday night when Chris has that data. And then for 5 and 6 to get there, this is reasonable. It's within the distances, and it meets within it. So I feel pretty comfortable about that. And there's 2 possibilities on position 4 that one would answer that if that is the trajectory from the front of the house, that if the bullet kicked to the right and at some point the shot was fired when Maggie's in front of the doghouse, I can understand that. The alternative spot is this position straight above her and firing and creating the head injury, the fatal shot that had the stippling and the bullet kicking back and hitting the leg and landed beside. So this position 4 is the one that I really don't have a true understanding of yet.
All right. And Grammy Nini, Mr. Steve, did you go by spent shells or by wounds on Maggie?
Spent shells only, from the positioning of knowing where the gun would need to be to create the landing and landing in those areas.
Is that you or me?
There's something happening on the computer. Hopefully the computer is not going out.
Kind of making a funky noise.
But no, the injuries to victims, it's hard to ever track because they can move. A victim can move and roll, and so it's hard to tell when it's relating to trying to figure out trajectories from the victim. Don't know what that is.
Whoop, wrong one. Grammy Nini, couldn't spent shells been kicked or moved?
Yes, but they wouldn't have been kicked or moved very far. Like I said, it's fairly easy that with a gun, knowing that it kicks to the right and knowing how far it kicks, that how can it be explained? And this scenario I built for this explains almost all of it, but there is still room for discussion. And like I said, this is one that makes sense to me.
All right. And what's the name? Sofer Scribbles. Hi, Steve. Do you think Alex's cousin could be second shooter?
He was involved in one that he was arrested for. Yes, it's very possible.
Oh, Connie Cat sounds like a Discord alert.
Oh, it could be.
We need to turn the Discord alerts off. Thank you, Connie Cat.
Yeah.
We will do that.
The Google machine makes strange noises.
Yes, it does. Nursk. I'm not sure of that name. Drop us a like if you can before you leave. We certainly would appreciate it. You've got an announcement to make about tomorrow.
Oh, yes. It's Super Bowl Sunday, so our members only live I normally do for all our members on Sunday. We'll move that to Wednesday, and I'll have all our members meeting on Wednesday. And then y'all enjoy the Super Bowl. Hope whoever you're rooting for wins.
Here we go.
Uh-oh.
Kristen.
Hey, Kristen. It's good to see you.
Cure.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you for your support. Appreciate that.
Yeah, I'm getting it from everybody. Everybody's busy tonight. Okay. And what you going to do for Valentine's? We're going to be here, right?
Mm-hmm.
You do anything special?
I've got discussing.
We will be here Valentine's.
Yes, we will be here for Valentine's. Chris and I are working on some special stuff, and so we'll have to see where we're at on that. And if y'all appreciate if you go over and support Chris, which he's absolutely has been extremely helpful to me as we create this stuff, and we're going to be going out working some cold cases together this coming year. And absolutely,
look at here,
Gilly Pickles.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate your support,
and thanks for the email.
Absolutely.
All right, and we got some Phillies fans, some
Yeah.
Chiefs fans.
Man, I like both of them, so I'm in a fix.
And Jill Downey, Mrs. Steve, is that Valentine question a trap? No, I already knew where I would be for Valentine's.
Yes,
I'm good.
Mm-hmm.
I am good.
After 33 years.
I get it.
Yeah,
And Jennifer Rochelle, that's her daughter's birthday. You should be with your daughter that day.
All right, guys. Well, we appreciate everybody being here tonight. Y'all stay safe out there, and we'll see y'all. I'll be on Chris's show Monday night, I believe, and then I'll see you on our regular show on
One
Tuesday.
more question.
Mm-hmm.
This is from Beth. Hi, Steve. Did they find the dog Bubba back in the cage when they discovered Maggie and Paul's bodies?
I don't know. That's a good question. I'll have to find that out.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I think we're good, y'all.
Appreciate it. Y'all
Love
stay
ya.
safe out there, and we'll see you soon.